On this episode of Book Reports Podcast,
Cameron's romantic fan fiction.
We are heroes.
Leave the freak alone.
Trump punk.
Cameron teaches us to love.
And much, much more.
Welcome to Book Reports Podcast, a monthly podcast of high literary discussion and low-brow humor. I'm Bryce Diener.
And I'm Sam Tyler.
And our special guest this episode,
very special,
is a individual that we have known for, I think, we could say at least a decade.
When we met him, he had a mohawk. Just to get you a little teaser excited.
He was in an 80s grunge band.
Mm-hmm. He was living in a post-apocalyptic world. He was building cars. He was throwing razor-sharp boomerangs. He's Cameron Ongst. Yeah.
Welcome, Cameron. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, guys. What's up?
That humility will be your downfall.
Well, despite that, thank you for being on the podcast, Cameron.
Sure. I'm curious, Cameron. Normally we ask our gusts, what kind of books they like to read, what kind of genres they kind of go after in terms of literature.
But since you're a functioning illiterate,
what pictures do you like to look at? No, I'm curious. Is there maybe a specific genre you don't like to read, or like, is there anything like you wouldn't go after if you saw it on a table of free books?
I decide if I like a book, like, partway into it a little bit.
Okay.
I like action, though.
So you're already committed to the point...
Kind of. I'm not committed until
before you
I
judge
see,
it. Oh,
hey,
man.
this is interesting.
Okay.
But I like it. If it has a cool title, I'll check it out. But
Guilty of that, yeah. I've been there before,
yeah.
Especially library book sales. So is there anything that you tend not to enjoy? That's something you just sort of put down?
Really big books scare me.
Do you mean big books in terms of very thick volumes?
Like Harry Potter books.
Oh, my word.
Oh, buddy.
Because I can't finish those within
well, you were
a
in
certain
luck
period.
Because they have audio versions.
Yeah.
That's how Bryce got through them.
The first time!
If I read them, and then I get to, like, the middle, it's, like, 5 months later, and then I forget what the beginning's about.
Oh, buddy.
Oh, my gosh. That's awesome.
So that's why I like it.
Because I was thinking, like, in terms of, like, big books, like, maybe he doesn't like the big coffee table books of photos of...
cheetahs.
Utah. Yeah.
Photos of Utah. Who wouldn't want to read that?
That's why it's on the coffee table.
Here's a rock. Here's a Mormon. Utah.
See you next time.
It's one picture. A special hello to our listeners in Utah.
I'm sorry, this is the last episode the Mormons will be listening to us.
I hope you've enjoyed the previous 5, because you're not going to listen to any more after that.
We are slowly cutting out all of our listeners by insulting
First
them.
it was Kansas.
Yeah. And no one remembers the other episodes.
This past lunar cycle, the volume that I read, I'm kind of tired of saying this month the book I read, so I thought I'd switch it up a little bit.
So you only did it in 28 days, is what you're saying?
That's right, just like Sandra Bullock in Rehab. 28 Days is a movie about Sandra Bullock and the character goes to rehab. Anywho...
Did they tell her to go to rehab and she said no?
Oddly enough, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, crazy enough. If you've listened to our previous episode with the Tamblins, you'll know that we got our first on-air book recommendation. Rory Tamblin recommended a book to me, and before we left their home, that's right, Cameron, we recorded in their home, and they provided brunch. What's your excuse?
On location.
Mm-hmm. She gave me a copy of Leviathan. Cue the book recommendation fanfare. This is our first book recommendation, a book recommended on the podcast, and one of us actually went and read the book. I was very pleased to be able to read it. It was a lot of fun. It's a book I've wanted to read for a while. The book is Leviathan by Scott Westerfield. If you look at the cover, you might think, hey, this is probably a steampunk book.
Listeners, let me describe it for you. There is a either boy or girl, no one can really tell, in one of the old-timey pilot hats. It does look very steampunky. It's very glossy. The words Leviathan are glaring back at me. I think I'm getting a suntan.
If you were piloting a plane right now, it'd be crashing. Before talking about this book, I'm just going to ask you guys, what is steampunk? Can you guys tell me that?
Oh, man.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the term?
No.
I kind of have, and all I know is you take a normal everyday object, cover it in useless piping, and spray paint it either gold or silver, and that's it.
That is a great answer. That is honestly 90% of steampunk. That is not an incorrect answer.
I'm sorry to any of our steampunk listeners who have just cut out.
But as I said, that's 90% of steampunk.
Oh, okay.
Steampunk is one of those things that's kind of like film noir in that it's an aesthetic, it's a genre, it's a movement. It's not just one obvious, easy thing to describe. What you did, honestly, was a really good description of what most of steampunk is. But there's also another part of it, which is that steampunk is kind of taking the setting of the Victorian era, the 1850s, the 1890s, and moving them forward a little bit in technology and in modern attitudes. You've got clockwork mechanical men, airships, computers, that kind of stuff, but it's all using steam, hence the word steampunk. I subscribe to the theory that there are different kinds of steampunk. Classic steampunk is, the Victorian era. Right. What happens when you take those ideas and put them in other eras? And this book is an example of that because it takes place in World War I. What I'm calling trench punk.
I think that's what the British called the Germans. You trench punks.
You trench punks. Trench punk sounds like a Harry Potter monster now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Trench punk. There's also diesel punk, which is, when it's in World War II. Nuclear punk, which is when it's 50s and 60s and that kind of stuff. But specifically, this one is World War I, so I'm calling it trench punk.
If it's modern day, Trump punk.
Trump punk!
Trump.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So this book takes place, as I said, during World War I. So it is an alternate history. It's similar to our world, but it's not our world. In this world, you've got the Allies and the Central Powers? It's Axis in World War II, so it's the Central Powers in World War I. In this world, the two factions are divided by all the treaties they signed, but they're also divided by what technology they use. On the side of the Allies, they have what are called Darwinists. And in this universe, Charles Darwin, besides, coming up with the theory of evolution, he also discovered DNA, or as it called in this, life chains. So they use mutated animals that they've created through genetic engineering in 1914. So they've got gigantic flying whales that they use as airships. They have floating giant squids, they're like hot air balloons. They have my favorite animal, which is, I think it's called a flechette bat. And basically,
hey, we're trying to keep swear words out of this, okay?
I'm sorry.
This is a family show that no family listens to.
Hey kids, let's listen to Bookport's podcast. No, you're not my father. Get out of the house.
Who are you? We've never met before. That's our grassroots campaign. We just break into people's homes, yell at them to listen to our podcast,
and pretend to be their father. Or mother, I suppose, I guess.
I made pancakes. Book Report's podcast.
That's a man in a wig, Mom.
Don't talk about your mother that way.
So anyway, it's flechette bat is my favorite of the Darwinist creations. It's a bat that they can use certain lights to control where it goes. So they can direct it on the battlefield. And when they change the light to red, the bats become super afraid of red light, and they start to poop.
Whoa.
And the bats have been fed incredibly sharp flechettes, that's the name flechette, which is, it's basically like shrapnel. Uh-huh. And then they poop out the shrapnel at high velocity, and it just destroys what's underneath them. Oh. That's why it's my favorite, because it's the most ridiculous thing in this book, in my opinion.
That's kind of weird.
But that's the Darwinists, and that's the union made up of England. Let me just check the map at the front. The map's really cool because it shows you a map of Europe at the time, and it has all the different nations, and they're illustrated to show whether they're Darwinists, they're drawn to be a creature, or if they're on the other side, which is the clanker, which are those guys that use large mechanical, not war robots, but like mech suits and that kind of stuff. And it's made up of Britain and France and all the other nations that are on the Allied side. And the other side are the clankers, which, as I said, they use a lot of more mechanical stuff. They believe the Darwinists are using unholy creatures.
Do you think there's a fan fiction crossover between Wizard of Oz and Leviathan, where the Tin Man is a former Axis war machine?
And the Cowardly Lion is the war machine.
I hope so.
Write this down. Write this down.
Fans, write this down. Write it for us.
Cameron,
send
if
it in.
Steal this idea. So help me.
We have it on record. We will take this to court.
Not again, Cameron. Not again. But that's the background of this, is that these two sides are using different means to wage war on each other. And this takes place just at the beginning of World War I. One of the main characters is Alec, and he is the son of Archduke Francis Ferdinand, the guy whose death started World War I.
What's interesting is that the driver actually took a wrong turn, and the guy who assassinated Archduke Francis Ferdinand was sitting at like a little cafe, just forlorn that the Archduke was like in town, but he couldn't do anything about it. He just happened to drive past. And it's like, oh, this is the perfect time to pull out my gun and start World War One.
Not to say that knowledge isn't important. However, that's not what happens in this book. Because it is
the book that's
history.
fiction?
Yes. Like I said, it's an alternate history.
Okay.
In this one, the Archduke survives the assassination attempt and is poisoned later that day by German agents who want the war to start.
That sucks.
And Alec, who is a fictional character, he's not one of the actual children that they had, goes on the run because he has a special background, shall we say, without spoiling anything, which could change the tide of the war.
Is he a doo-wop singer? Is that his special background?
No, he's a tattoo artist. / pearl diver.
A man of means.
A real Renaissance man, really, if you will. A doo-wop singer, tattoo artist, choreographer. Anyway.
Noted thespian.
Thespian actor's actor. The other character is named Darren, and Darren is a Scottish girl who hides her gender to join the British Air Service so that she can fly in the air and enjoy the life of the military, as she's always wanted to do since she was a girl.
Is it just like Bewitched where they replace
Change
Darren halfway through and no one ever says anything?
It is exactly like that. I never even noticed they switched during the book. You have to look really close to the illustrations. Basically, the story is shown from their two perspectives, and then eventually they meet together and the story really starts going. Mm-hmm. Every book I've done so far for the podcast has had spies in it. Technically, but only technically, this book has no spies. Because there are people who are going on diplomatic missions undercover without telling anybody anything, and people who are having fake IDs and that kind of stuff. So there is spying in the book, but technically there are no spies. There is espionage, though. It just made it in. Made it in, so it still counts. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It is young adult fiction, which I must confess is a term that I don't really care for. Young adult fiction suggests 18 to like 25 or so, whereas this is really for teenagers. Why do we call it young adult fiction? That seems kind of strange. But it was pretty good. I think any problems I had with the book were mostly from the fact that he had to write for that age group. Like, if he'd been writing this for adults, for example, he might have been able to go deeper into the world and really kind of show some of the things that I felt were like, well, what about this? And
do you think this author has that ability to be that
I think so.
Good of an author to write for adults?
I think he does. It's a trilogy, Leviathan, Behemoth, and Goliath. And I plan on picking up the other two in the future so I can finish it up. I think, in a way, it's a compliment to him that I wish he'd written more about the world than he did in the book. Like, the world is that interesting. He really goes in detail talking about the Darwinists. He doesn't really discuss where did the clanker technology come from. I mean, if all of a sudden they have walking tanks, I'd like to know why. But he doesn't really go into that very much.
If, we suggest to Scott Westerfield to send us his other two books, Scott
Westerfield, please send us the other two books.
We will read them.
It's my subliminal voice. Nobody's even going to hear it.
That's right.
Once I had the white noise overlay.
Except the dogs that can hear at that pitch.
Actually, I'll just have it in reverse and see what happens.
Paul is dead.
That's really, I wish I'd thought of that. I'm jealous now. I really wish I'd thought of that.
Well, you can say it and you can cut out my part.
That's a really good idea. What on earth was I talking about?
You wanted more...
I think there's definitely room for him to write more. I think he's left himself a very neat, big blank space.
You mean like 2 sequels?
Well, I mean, like there's a lot more though. Like he's got all of World War I to adapt and fool around with. Like at the very beginning of this book, the war hasn't really got going yet.
Okay,
it's really just the prelude to war of the death of the Archduke, buildup of nations starting to go. Well, we've got a treaty with this guy, so we have to go to war, and we got a treaty with this person, so we have to go to war to protect that one, and so on. That's sort of the great powers of Europe just sort of all agreeing. Okay, if we all have treaties with 2 big blocks, we'll never have a war because that'd just be too horrific, and then it just sort of happened. Who's going to war with who is part of the big point of it. So I look forward to seeing what else he covers and what else he fools with, because he obviously has fun with the history. He mentions a bunch of interesting little details from World War I, and what was really neat is at the end, he gives a little synopsis of, okay, this was true, this was true, this was true, this actually happened. This person existed, but I really changed them up to make them more interesting, that kind of thing.
That's cool. Would you say that this book made you more interested in World War I as, like, I want to find out what the actual truth is?
World War I is a subject I certainly want to dip my toe into anyway. Like, I know so much about World War II. World War I is not really a blank space. I know enough.
Right.
I know enough to be able to tap dance my way around not knowing something, but...
Remember the Lusitania.
Man, when the Germans overran that fortress in Texas, that was really that was really rough for a lot of people. I think that my interest in World War I and learning more about it is certainly piqued by this book. Being able to go back and be like, okay, so this was true, and to really dig into, like, for example, the role that Winston Churchill played in World War I is certainly something I don't have that much of a background in. I know he was there for part of it. But.
You are in luck, because I happened to watch a history documentary yesterday about World War I. Winston Churchill did get his like fame in World War I, and they're like, okay, I guess we'll keep you around for the next one.
He was just revving up for World War II.
Yeah,
that's all that was. He was just getting excited for it.
By the way, a little throwback to one of our previous books in our last episode, I had talked about The Professor and the Madman, the creating of the Oxford English Dictionary. The professor, James Murray, if I remember this, because it was a month ago, he was in England in the insane asylum, and they kept, requesting that the British government allow him in his final years to go back to America to live out his final years. The gentleman in the British government who allowed him to do so was Winston Churchill.
Huh. That's interesting.
Of World War II fame. Another throwback to last episode.
Yeah, this is our most referential episode yet. Bet this is fun for you, Cameron.
Listen to the podcast. What was interesting was, when Woodrow Wilson ran for president for his second term, he ran on the motto of, he kept us out of the war.
Ha ha ha.
Yeah. And so, with all this, they started sending, cruise liners to, all these countries. There were still people cruising around. We still traded with Germany because we were technically a neutral country, which is so weird to hear. There's a world war. America's not in it. Well, nowadays,
To be fair, we did that with World War II as well. I mean, we were only in it, after the first 5 years, I think it was,
something
World
like
War
that.
II?
Yeah, 4 or 5. For whatever reason, the U-boats just start sinking cruise liners, and that's how we get the sinking the Lusitania, and there were over 100 Americans on the boat, and that completely just flipped America's view of, we need to get into this war, we can't just have our citizens being blown out of the water. And then they start training up troops, and that's how we get into World War I. But it was so far at the end of World War I that it's really just a war that we don't really cover in history classes. It's a war, like you said, you don't know much about. Because we spent so much time in World War II, we want to learn more about that because we definitely had a more pivotal role.
But yeah, I would definitely say that we don't cover World War I for that reason. And not to mention, too, it's also a very depressing war that nobody really got anything good out of. It's not like a war that we can go back and feel good about like World War II. World War II is the feel-good war of the season.
Gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling.
Well, yeah.
Or there could have been the grenade shrapnel in your chest. Whatever one it is.
Is that warm, fuzzy feeling, or is it mustard gas?
I would disagree with you there, because I would say there's so many things that still affect us today that came out of World War I. Like the Geneva Convention, I believe, was after World War I.
But would you agree that World War I clearly solved all of our problems and we never had a war since?
No. But World War II could have been a lot worse if it weren't for decisions that they made because of World War I.
Well, World War I also caused World War II, so it doesn't really matter.
Because, Cameron, if you'll remember.
What? Germany invades again? Who's riding this slop?
Jump in the shark!
Hey, I think World War I is just one of those ones that we don't have a nice, easy ending to. There really is just this continuing lingering, and we're at it again after 20 years. That's just part of history.
I do have a question about the sequels to Leviathan. Are they also covering World War I, or are they other areas in history that the author
I'm pretty sure
covers?
they're still World War I. I haven't read them myself, but I'm pretty sure they're still World War I. It does make me kind of wonder, that is sort of the big thing of alternate history is, now that you've changed one era of history, what's that mean for the ones going forward? Which would be kind of fun to see. I wish he had a timeline of events leading up to it at the front of the book. I think that really would have made a big difference, and it wouldn't have added the page count too much. If I could change anything, it would just have a timeline at the front. I think that would flesh out the world. I think it'd be a bit more interesting.
Scott Westerfield, I hope you're listening and taking notes. This episode was for you.
Yeah, come on. It's good information because it came from a podcast. You know it's good. Write this down.
They don't let just anyone have these.
So, Cameron,
Yeah.
as a high-functioning illiterate, what book did you read
What
this
picture
month?
book did you pick off the shelf?
I read Heroes Don't Run by Harry Mazer. It's really cool because it takes place in World War II, but it's towards the end. Because the main character, his name's Adam Pelko. His dad dies during Pearl Harbor, so then he wants to go in the military, but he's only 17. So you can go in the military when you're 17, but you have to have a parent signature.
Right.
Okay.
And he lives in California with his mom, and she won't sign for him because, well, your dad died. Adam and 2 of his friends were in a rowboat during Pearl Harbor there, but they didn't.
Oh, right.
Like, one of his friends got severely injured. His mom won't sign for him, but the reason he wants to go in so early is because he thinks the war is going to be over soon.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
He wants to kind of avenge his dad, I kind of think, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
So he tells his mom he's going to go live with his grandfather in New York. He asks his grandfather to sign for him, and his grandfather says, no, your mom would be like, so mad at me, right? But then after like weeks and weeks of him just begging his grandfather, he gets his grandfather to sign for him. He goes in, and he doesn't tell his mom till after he's already in boot camp. So...
Hey, Mom,
it's-
funny thing happened.
I know you may have noticed by now I haven't been home for several weeks.
Thanks for the cookies. They took a while to find me because I'm not with my grandfather. You might notice this is unofficial Army stationery. Funny thing about that.
And the photo I've sent along has me in some sort of uniform.
Do you like my haircut?
Yeah, so he goes in the Marines, and he goes in there to boot camp. He has a couple friends, like a little squad. It's not just like one main character or 2 main characters. It's like 3 of them. One's Ben. And all the training in boot camp, he was like the best, like the most fit. Like the vibe I got from him was he's like the good one of the group. Because later they go to see girls, like, and Ben is like, nah, I'm good. And then his other friends are Andy and Roy. Roy already had a girlfriend, so didn't go. But anyways, this whole thing was after boot camp. They finally became Marines.
Right.
By the way, boot camp wasn't that great. Obviously, like screaming in their face,
wait.
like getting on the ground.
You're telling me boot camp isn't just a barrel of laughs?
No.
Is it the summer camp of adults?
After boot camp, well,
Summer camp
they
of
go
adults.
home to see, and then he sees his mom for the first time. Of course, they miss him, but then she pulls him aside and, like, kind of goes at him, I guess. like, what's wrong with you? Like, you and my grandfather don't get along anymore, and all this stuff. But anyways, what I was going to was, after they go see the girls, like, they didn't do anything, like, you know, but they just hung out. I don't know where they were.
Cameron, did they kiss? Cameron,
No, they didn't.
Did they kiss?
They didn't
Did they
kiss.
go to the malt shop?
They
and
hold
they
hands.
get a milkshake with 2 straws?
Play something on the jukebox.
No. Like, I like when they combine action, but then throw a little romance in, because it's all romance, and it's kind of like, eh. But if it's action-y,
Action romance.
and it has romance, that's cool. So they just, like,
Ooh.
met for the first time, and then, like,
Welcome to World War II relationships.
hung out. They hung out, and he went back in the Marines. But he was like, can we write each other? And then, so they, like, write each other, like, the
And
rest
she
of
says,
his
I don't have an
family.
address, goodbye.
But no. So when they go back after their boot camp, they get sent to Okinawa. Kind of cool because in the book, like he wants to get in before it ends. And Okinawa is like
That's
one
the
of the
big last
final
ones, yeah.
final battles before like Hiroshima and stuff. And he's buddies with Ben. Ben's like a sharpshooter. So they pull him into another platoon. And so they get separated. They're in like foxholes.
Right.
They're down in the ground. And then they wait for people to
It's
come.
island fighting. I mean, the one major advantage the Japanese had on the islands was living on the islands for years and building up all the rat holes
And we
and
just
so
showed
on.
up and we're like, hey.
Yeah, and had to storm across them like crazy.
Adam's fighting and people are dying obviously, but like they were in the war for a while until the book like mentioned people were dying. Like I'm
That's
like,
interesting.
where's the action? Who's getting killed? Like all these main characters can't survive, like, or else it would
So
just
how-
be like a super happy
How
book.
far into the book before he actually gets into combat, and how far after that did they start dying?
A little over halfway.
Okay.
He gets into the battle.
So it's a
because
lot
the
of
first
basic
half
training and that kind
is
of stuff.
Basic training.
That makes
and stuff.
sense. That makes sense.
And then maybe a couple chapters later is when they mention people dying because they mention like the fighting and the bullets and stuff, but no main character dies. And
Okay.
so they're in the foxholes. He can't like sleep or anything. He doesn't even want to eat because he's just like sick to his stomach. He considers himself like a wimp. He goes back to like their base and meets up with his friend Roy, but he wants to really find Ben because Ben's like his best friend. So it's like, have you seen Ben? No. Okay. Have you seen Andy? Because Andy's their other friend, and Andy went home because he was injured. And so they go to the guy who has like the list of like deceased
Casualties.
people, and stuff.
Uh-oh.
And they find Ben on there, so he's dead.
Okay.
He goes right back in the battle. They're in a foxhole, and this other guy's name's Rosie that he met, or they're just talking, and then a mortar comes flying, and he yells. When he comes back to consciousness, he's being carried by guys. Like, he's injured, he's hurt, And he finds out that, like, Rosie, when the mortar hit, jumped on him.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Rosie died, but saved his life. And so he had, like, parts of shrapnel in him. And when he went to, like, the hospital, there was pieces of shrapnel, but there was also, like, pieces of bone in him. Like,
From Rosie.
Yeah, from Rosie.
Oh.
Inside
I have the powers of a full Marine and parts of Rosie.
But yeah, so at this time, it's, like, crazy because his best friends are, like, dying, and he just made it into the military in time for Okinawa when the mortar hit, and then he gets in the hospital. And then when he finally got sent home was when Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened. They sent him home. So that was pretty cool, but what was really cool was, like, that girl that he met, they rode each other the whole entire time, but he got to the train station, and he was gonna go home. Then she shows up at the train station right before the train's leaving, and, like, they don't even kiss. They just... Oops, sorry, I clapped. Does that matter?
They kissed.
They kissed.
They didn't kiss.
Yeah.
They didn't kiss. Yeah.
No, they didn't.
It's fine.
No, they didn't kiss. And, like, the train started to move. So if he wanted to go home, he's like, I'll come back if you want me to. And she's like, I do. So he gets on. It's kind of...
Nah, I'm okay. So how do your mom for me?
So he gets on the train, goes home, like, sees his mom, and, like, calls his grandfather. And they're all, like surprised he's alive, really. Because, like, Okinawa and stuff.
They didn't send him like a...
Oh, he wrote
Oh, okay.
them.
I was wondering. Okay.
But when he was in the hospital, like, that whole time period, he didn't write his mom. Because he didn't want her to freak out. And when he was in the full body cast, and when he was in the...
Dear Mom, Japan is nice. Making lots of friends.
MacArthur's really nice.
And when he was in the full body cast, like, he couldn't write. So there would be a person that came to the bed and, like, do you want to write? And he's like, well, my mom will, like, freak out if she sees a letter from me and someone else's handwriting, like, thinking I'm dead because someone else wrote the letter. So he just waits until he gets, like, in the hospital and then calls, like, everyone, basically.
Oh, okay.
Dear Mom, my hands are full of martinis right now. I cannot write.
There are all these puppies on my chest, so I couldn't get up to write you a letter.
But I could dictate it.
When he goes home, well, he has to walk with a cane, first of all. We should know that, because he's like,
Does he
what,
beat a small
19?
child with it?
He's probably like 19.
I'll say, boy.
I can't imagine my age, like, walking with a cane, you know what I mean? And he has to, like, use crutches and stuff.
You'd look good with a cane.
Oh.
You'd make it work.
Just bedazzle it.
Yeah.
Anyone looks good with a bedazzle.
A good crystal skull on top will really help you out.
Listen, you bedazzle anything, and you're winning.
You bedazzle anything and you're winning. Book Reports Podcast. The only bedazzled podcast on iTunes. If you walk in here right now, you'd think you're inside a disco ball.
Oh, if you are allergic to reflective light, you would die in here.
If you're allergic to reflected light, please rate us on iTunes.
Please, anybody,
Please.
I don't care if it relates to the podcast. We just need comments.
Give us soup recipes. We don't care. Just rate us on iTunes with something.
Soup recipes.
So he's walking with a cane, huh?
And then he goes back home. It ends with him playing with his sister, just admiring the fact that he's actually home and alive. So before he went into the military, it never set in that he could actually, like, be seriously injured or die. And then once he got there, it was, like, hard to believe that he actually got home because of how real, like, that was.
What's the title again?
Heroes Don't Run.
Good news, Bryce.
What's that, Sam?
We're heroes.
Yes. I mean, heck, I'll take, good guys don't jog. I'll settle for that.
Nice guys barely walk.
But the title was like...
Jerks roll. Do they reference the title?
No, they don't. But I was kind of disappointed because I expected, like, a really, like, intense moment where he's like, heroes don't run, and then he, like, starts, like,
look,
like fighting, like, you know what I mean?
understand one thing.
And
Get busy living, or heroes don't get running.
And the only part that it mentions him, like, running, quote unquote, is when Ben, his friend, is in the other squad, and they pass by later, and he sees him. He was like, oh, I could go be with them. He'd be letting down his team.
Yeah.
So he's like, can't leave them, basically. So that's kind of the closest that it came to actually.
Heroes don't run.
Yeah.
This was a book that was all about sort of the one man's experience in World War II. Does this make you more curious to learn more about it? Or were you more satisfied with the fictional side of it? Or the...
Yeah, I guess it would make me more interested because I like action and stuff. stuff. So usually like World War II altogether is really interesting because like you guys said earlier, like you have the Europe side, the Holocaust and all that, right?
Yeah.
And then
all the stuff with Germany.
And then Pearl Harbor in Japan.
Yeah.
And it's like two separate wars.
Completely
certainly.
two separate wars, absolutely.
But going on at the same time. But yeah, most of the books I've read about World War II are on the Pacific side, like with the Japanese.
See, mine's the opposite view. I tend to read more about the Europe than the Pacific War. Interesting. Are you specifically choosing Pacific, or is it just how the books tend to land in your lap? Or
It's how the books tend to land, but I think if I had to do a choice, I'd pick Pacific. The island scene is kind of cool.
See, I can just feel like how muggy and gross the islands are.
Bryce and I tend to sweat, Cameron. I don't know if you know this, but
1940s Europe is where we want to be.
be some Bastogne winters.
But whenever like I think of the Europe side of World War II, it's usually about the Holocaust.
Okay.
Right.
So.
Now I'm curious to know about yours. It definitely seemed like they definitely glossed over any of the gore or like the action, like you were saying. Do you feel that the author really rushes through the book?
Yeah, it's like fast-paced kind of.
Right.
Doesn't go really deep into detail on any certain thing. A little more detail would have been kind of cool, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was nice because I could just stay like interested the whole entire time.
Sure. It's not lagging on you.
Yeah.
Was there anything you did not like about this book?
Well, I didn't like that the last time we saw the girl, they were just like, bye.
Ladies, if you're listening, Cameron is really into romance.
And he's dreamy, just so you know.
Yeah.
Because like I like the action,
Well,
but the romance is kind of cool too. So it's kind of like, oh.
Romance and action, honestly, have a similar idea that they both have payoffs. You know what I mean? There's a build-up and there's a payoff. Battle scenes generally getting more and more intense, as does romances. And so you want a payoff of either an action actually happening or an actual romance happening. So it makes sense that you felt a little bit on the disappointed side if you didn't actually get a kiss in the book, Cameron.
And I don't think there's like another book, you know what I mean? So it's like, that's
There's
it.
no sequel.
Yeah, so that's
So
it.
what you're saying
Kinda
is
like-
you're writing fan fiction that follows...
Let me see your book. Cameron has clearly written in the margins
Oh, boy.
an incredibly romantic short story at the very last page. It's really
I
touching,
should.
really.
Sam, would you like to read an excerpt from Cameron's...
I would like to read an excerpt. Is it, main character's name's Adam, is it? Okay. What's the girl's name?
Helen.
Helen, okay.
I thought it was
Helen Keller.
Rosie.
Adam wrapped his arms
that's
around Helen and gave her a lovely kiss. She backed away, saying, "No, Adam, we can't. I'm already married to the military. That's right. I joined too. I'm off to go fight Tojo in the Pacific." Take that, Japan. Adam fell silent and walked away, heartbroken that Helen had left him for the Marines.
Hold on. Wait.
Wait. Turn the page. Oh, I can't read this handwriting. Bryce,
Oh,
would you
here,
read that?
actually, yeah. Cameron, before the podcast, was just finished writing this.
This is the worst thing we've ever done on the podcast. And I love it.
You can't read the handwriting here. You're in luck because I actually saw Cameron before the podcast just finish writing this section.
Darn.
Even though Sam just said the name, I can't make out what the girl's name is.
It's Helen.
Helen, that's right. That, I can see that you've written
you
that.
can see that, yeah.
Now. Dear Helen, this is a letter that Adam must have written. I, too, have moved on. I am now married to my country and Uncle Sam.
We'll be very happy together. We have 50 children. Yeah.
I am happy to stay friends. It turns out the real treasure was friendship all along.
Love, friend, Adam.
Adam. Just friends.
Adam.
Remember, P.S. Heroes don't run.
PSS, remember the Lusitania.
That's so funny.
Cameron, that's some fantastic
That's good
fan fiction. I mean,
Thanks.
I think we're
I was
gonna have
hoping
to-
it'd go another way, but you know. Just can't help it.
Hey, you wrote it, okay? I like that we still left him disappointed. After his fanfiction was all about getting them together,
Yeah.
we still ended up keeping them apart. We couldn't, even in Cameron's fake fantasy, we couldn't get them together. I'm sorry, Cameron.
Yeah.
Anyway,
any other questions?
yeah. Do you have anything else you want to talk about in the book? Any more fan fiction you want to make up for you? I do apologize for that, Cameron. We've never done that
it's
before. I
fine.
promise.
But we are going to start now.
Absolutely. If we don't like your book, we're gonna change it.
The book that I chose for this month is called The Other Wes Moore. One name, Two Fates, and it was written by Wes Moore. So this is actually going to get a little confusing because the two main characters are both named Wes Moore. So I'm going to call them Good Wes and Bad Wes.
Are the description of Good and Bad Wes going to change depending on their life situations and what their choices are? So Good Wes could become Bad Wes halfway through the book?
No.
Okay, good.
This isn't World War II, sadly. I didn't stick with the theme of wartime.
Dear Wes.
Love Wes. Unlike Cameron, your characters, mine actually get together as friends. If you'd like to read my book.
Oh, no,
afterwards.
his were friends. That was the problem.
Oh, okay.
They wanted.
If you want romance, this is not the book for you. The idea is that these two individuals, both named Wes Moore, both grew up in the same neighborhood of Baltimore. One ended up going down a positive path. One ended up in jail for the rest of his life. And so the idea, when I had bought the book, was like, oh, this is going to be a neat look into nature versus nurture sort of thing. And I was actually a little disappointed in this book. Because by the age of 3... Good Wes moved to New York.
Oh,
so,
okay.
The idea is, when I bought it, I thought, oh, they're staying in the same neighborhood, but one happened to be making the right decisions, one didn't so much. But
who wrote this book?
Wes Moore.
Which one?
Good Wes.
Okay.
Is it nonfiction?
Yeah. Each chapter actually begins with a conversation that Good Wes actually went to visit Bad Wes in jail, and so they're just discussing their lives, discussing how they both ended up losing their fathers at very young ages. Or Good Wes, his father died. Bad Wes, his father was just out of the picture, and he wasn't really a part of his life, so they didn't really have father figures, whereas Good Wes still had his grandparents, and so his grandfather became a father figure. Right. And when they moved to New York, they lived with the grandparents, and so he had a better chance of becoming successful, whereas Bad Wes, his only male figure that he could look up to was his older brother, who was already in a gang.
When were they born?
Probably the 80s. It's definitely in the throes of the crack cocaine epidemic. Bad Wes gets caught a few times for being in possession of cocaine, intent to sell. Now, Good Wes actually does get into some trouble,
Not so good Wes.
Yeah. You thought he was good, but I flipped it on its head. He ends up trying to, drop out of school and stuff like that, and just kind of join a gang in New York. I guess his neighborhood, it wasn't as bad as back in Baltimore. His mother ends up sending him to a military academy. In the first 4 days, he tried to escape 4 different times.
First time, tunneling. Didn't work. Second time, catapult. Didn't work.
Third time, Zeppelin.
Didn't work.
That's crazy.
Fourth time, enlisting the trees to help him escape. Didn't work.
Wear a dress, walk out the front gate.
Yes, fourth time, disguise myself as a woman. Didn't work. In the military academy, they saw my boots.
I should have taken off my Navy hat. He actually becomes the youngest sergeant in charge of other individuals at his time there. He ends up joining the athletic teams, and colleges start coming after him with scholarships. He ended up going to Johns Hopkins University. He gets a degree, and he's doing all this incredible stuff, and he just keeps going up and up and up. Whereas Bad Wes, he just stays in that Baltimore gang. He ends up shooting a guy. He goes to jail for a little bit for that. There's this huge jewelry store robbery that he and his brother were a part of. Police nabbed them, and that's what he's in jail for now currently. I wish the book would have paid out more in the sense that I thought it was going to be when I first started, that they were going to stay in the same neighborhood.
Right.
But I guess technically you could say it was the choices of the family as a whole that changed Wes's life. But
I can kind of tell from the way you're talking about this book, though, Bryce, that you didn't seem to enjoy it.
Yeah, I really wanted it to pay out, honestly.
What didn't it do for you? What did you want to have done instead,
besides
to stay together?
Yeah, I think I went in thinking one thing, and then when the story became something else. That's the thing about telling a true story. It's not always...
You could have flipped it around. Come on, Wes. Now, how long was this book?
It was only about 180 pages.
Okay, so Wes is more.
Yes. Now, one really cool thing, the last 30 pages or so are different organizations like Big Brother, Big Sister.
Oh, okay.
Drug Rehab.
Okay.
They have the addresses, they have phone numbers, they have the websites, they have the cities that these places are in. So that way you can get connected to areas of help that you need. For nothing else, keep it for that last 20 pages, especially if it's you're in an inner city. A lot of them were for Baltimore because he ended up moving back to Baltimore trying to help the city. This section is going to be definitely smaller just because the book was small, but also I just was really disappointed by it. I definitely was going into this thinking oh, this is going to be a great scientific experiment of what is the power of a name. You know, the book Freakonomics. We get a story of a gentleman who names his first son Winner because he thought, hey, my son's going to be the best. He's going to be a winner. His second son, he's like, well, my first son is named Winner. Second son, Loser. Mm-hmm. That was a good, look into what is the power of a name. It turns out Winner ended up being arrested, just like Bad West.
Loser was awesome.
Yeah, Loser actually ended up going to college. I think he became a police officer, and they said he goes by Lou now.
Officer Lou.
Because like a lot of people think your name has an effect.
Like defines you.
Yeah.
Well, Bryce, I know for a fact that your name has an effect on you very greatly.
No.
Well, actually, specifically your last name, Bryce, in terms of your profession.
My first name kind of goes back to Cameron's book, because Bryce means swift runner. I was born not a hero. Thanks, Mom and Dad.
I never stood a chance.
My middle name means a gift of God, and my last name means servant. Diener is German for servant, and it comes from the German Leichendiener, which means corpse servant. They were the people that would take dead bodies and go and prepare them for funerals. And nowadays, in a medical profession, a diener is a person who takes bodies from a floor or from the ER or somewhere and takes them to the morgue.
And what are you?
In my job profession, I have transported a few dead bodies.
He's a hitman.
I don't even work at the hospital.
That's cool.
So this book, it's pretty much in your wheelhouse, though, I thought, with the combination of psychology and
definitely
nonfiction.
a psychological, definitely a scientific study.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm doubly disappointed, is that it didn't deliver in the way that I had expected it.
This kind of makes me wonder, this seems like a good time to talk about books that have disappointed us.
Sure. This is the first one ever.
That's
why it's
book
hard.
I've ever written.
I can think of a few books that are on my bookshelf that I have been disappointed by. Mm-hmm. There was a comedy book, and she was just talking about how she's alone, and she's traveling cross country, and she's having a terrible time, and none of it was funny. It's you're a comedy writer, and it's just a miserable, woe is me kind of story. I didn't even finish reading that book. There was another one by a Swedish author that was translated into English about some office space where this guy ends up finding a random corner in the office that he has a psychological breakdown and assumes that it's this well-furnished office. But because he spends all this time in the corner, he actually ends up solving a lot of the company's problems by doing paperwork over there because he thinks he's in this office. And so, but everyone is creeped out because this guy's standing in the corner for 4 hours at a time, not moving. He won't respond to us. But if he's creating good work, just leave him alone. But that's not what the book did. It's
so
he's
weird.
Creepy and we fired him. The end. It's he's solving company problems. Just leave the freak alone.
Book Reports Podcast. Leave the freak alone. I think since it's a book you don't like, it was a little hard to talk about for you.
It had nice pictures. Hey, yeah.
Nice pictures.
Yeah. Some of the pictures that they mentioned, here I am climbing Mount Kilimanjaro.
And that's Bad West.
Yeah. People on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro need drugs too, okay?
That was his escape route from jail. He's a very bad tumbler.
Here's a picture of me ringing the bell at NASDAQ. I think in terms of the way, and I'm really just talking to publishers here, if you're listening, which I know you aren't.
If you are a publisher, please rate us on iTunes.
Or SoundCloud.
Or SoundCloud.
I would
Give us a high five on Facebook. Send us pictures of cats, please. Just anyone.
Rate us Cameron fanfiction.
Yes. If
Please
you're a
do.
publisher, please get in contact with Cameron and publish his fanfiction sequel to Heroes Don't Run.
I'm gonna write one.
It is entitled
Lovers Don't Kiss.
Lovers Don't Kiss.
No!
That is exactly what it's called. Part of a trilogy.
No, but I would say, in terms of the way the photos were, it seemed like they just picked, opened the book at random. It's okay, this is where we can glue the photos in. It was like I'm reading the book, I'm halfway through a paragraph, halfway through a sentence, and then I get 8 pages of photos that have nothing to do. The chapter I'm in. It's just I remember this photo from when you talked about it 30 pages ago. I do like having photos in a book, but just the location. It's all about location.
It's true in real estate. It's true in books.
Real estate, yeah.
Real estate. It's true in real estate.
Do you want to buy a house? There are 5 bedrooms. 2 baths.
Anyway, I think we should probably stop.
We're going
soon.
downhill.
We should clearly have stopped this 20 minutes ago when we stopped Cameron's book.
Don't even go.
I'm just going to cut you this out.
I didn't bring a book this week.
Well, Well, that'll do it for this month's episode of Book Reports Podcast. Thanks a lot for coming along, Cameron.
Thank you so much.
Cameron, thanks for teaching us all about why romance is very important.
Cameron taught us how to love.
To love. Any place that people can go to find you online and see some of your cool projects you're doing?
Yeah, I actually have a YouTube channel called Ambassador of Jesus. And I make YouTube videos mainly based on biblical concepts and just questions that people email me or message me. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as the Ambassador of Jesus. So,
Can you give us any examples of the videos you've put up?
I've done that.
Describe a video in an audio format, please, Cameron.
Any subject or something I feel God lays on my heart, like from a certain verse in the Bible or a certain subject, like loving your enemies, say. And I'll just take like 4 to 8 minutes and just talk about like what the Bible says and how we can do that to the best of our ability as Christians. So
Very cool. Thanks again for joining us, Cameron.
yeah,
It's been great
thanks
having
for
you on
having
the show.
me. This is fun.
Sam, I think we also have an online presence as well. If listeners
Not
are...
really.
Oh, okay. If you'd like to find us on Friendster,
If you want to find an MP3 of this, come find us and we'll give you a
thumb
thumb drive.
please return it. We only have one. Be sure to check us out on SoundCloud. We have gotten a few hearts, which are likes on SoundCloud. Especially, Stephanie Hines, who was one of our previous guests. She was kind enough to like all of our pages there. Benjamin Heinzelman did the same thing. Big fan of ours over on SoundCloud.
And I believe we reached a milestone on iTunes recently, Bryce.
Just this week, we had over 100 downloads on iTunes.
Yes.
Thank you. Over 100 downloads now just on iTunes. We also have 30 to 50 on SoundCloud.
So get on that SoundCloud.
Yeah, come on, guys. We actually had a secret contest for the 100th download, and the winner of the 100th download wins a 2002 Ford Focus. It's actually my Ford Focus. Cameron, we've written down on this envelope, if you would be so kind to read the name.
It's a gold-plated envelope, by the way, everybody.
Bryce Diener.
Oh
my God, wow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was the 100th download, just happened to be, and so I get to keep my car. Okay.
Nice.
I hope you all will be sure to remember to be entered for our 200th listener contest. Remember,
It'll be Sam's car.
We'll be giving away whatever our guest is. It'll be their car. I'm not giving up Babe. Thank you very much.
Babe.
Not giving up Babe. Contest aside, please rate us on iTunes. It helps people find the show easier. If you look up Book Reports Podcast, we are the last thing that comes up, despite that being our title.
Yeah, we're like the fifth one.
So
there are people with random episodes called book reports that show up before us. So I don't even care if it's a positive review. It can be negative. Let us know what we're doing
that
wrong.
sends us further down the line. Yeah.
Make sure it's positive.
Please. Yeah.
Give us 5 stars. I don't care what you say.
Yeah, give us 5 stars, but then write negative things in the comment section.
There you go.
So,
or even you don't even have to write something relevant. Write, like Sam said, a soup recipe.
Soup recipes are good.
Or I walked my dog today. #blessed. Okay, I don't care what it is. The bar is set so low that literally, if you write us really anything, you are bound to
if you
get
want
mentioned.
a sequel to Heroes Don't Run, you can help Cameron out by writing the 3rd in the trilogy.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think that'd be fine.
It is getting to the point that if you just say something to us, you probably will get mentioned on the podcast. So
if
please,
you high five us physically, we will mention you.
yes. If you just walk up to us and say Book Reports Podcast, you have our attention. We will mention you on air.
You'll probably get a t-shirt out of it. Not a Book Reports Podcast, just whatever t-shirt I'm wearing.
Yeah, I will be shirtless the rest of the day, thanks to you.
Isn't that what you want, listeners? Isn't that what you want?
And we just lost all our listeners. You can also find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Book Reports Podcast. You can email us at bookreportspodcast@gmail.com. You can also get a hold of Sam and all his personal
And who
projects.
doesn't want that?
And all his personal projects at skullduggeryinthesmoke.blogspot.com. Sam, is there anything specifically you're working on right now that...
Yeah, actually, I'm working on a guide to Constantinople in the 1850s. So if that interests you, or you want to run a role-playing game set in Constantinople in the 1850s, I am the only resource right now for this. So feel like that's pretty cool.
Our theme music was produced by Kevin MacLeod. You can find his music and more of his content at incompetech.com. And that will do it for Book Reports Podcast.
Thanks a lot for listening.
I'm curious, Cameron. Mostly ask our readers, what book do you like to read? I'm going to switch it up and say, is there a a specific... Let's start that again.
Are you sure you don't want to just ask a regular question? I'm going to switch it up by just mumbling a bunch of jargon, and you try to figure out what the question is.
In all your years of really understanding, have you ever, in your particular area of expertise, can you recall a specific time when, if you really look back on it, it happened?
Yeah. Cameron,
What are you talking about?